Okay, I'm going to kick things off. Hi, everyone. My name is Jocelyn Moffett, and I'm the Entertainment Industry Marketing Manager at Autodesk. First of all, thank you so much for joining us today. Over the next hour, you're going to hear from our friends at Dolby, Bluepost, and of course, our own Flame product manager on the latest Dolby Vision workflows in Flame and producing HDR content for streaming services. Before I dive into the agenda, I do just want to take a moment to acknowledge that these are unprecedented, challenging times right now across the globe. So we really appreciate that you've taken the time out of your day to tune into this session and hope that you're all staying safe and well. Like most of you, our entire team is working from home. So as much as we've done to troubleshoot today's webinar, we ask that you please bear with us if there are any technical difficulties or connection issues. So I'm just going to run through the agenda before we kick things off. First up today, Tom Graham, who is head of Dolby Vision Content Enablement, is going to give a quick overview of Dolby Vision. He'll then hand the floor to Flame product manager Will Harris, who's going to go through the latest updates in Flame. Then Adam Archer, who is technical director and senior Flame artist at Bluepost, is going to come up and talk about using Flame's new Dolby Vision workflows in production. He'll share a few recent use cases and examples, and we'll wrap up with a live Q&A at the end. Throughout the presentation, feel free to submit any questions you have in the Q&A panel at the bottom of your screens. We'll either save those questions for the live Q&A at the end or answer it right there in the chat. So without further ado, I will hand things over to Tom.
Thanks, Jocelyn. Hi, everybody. We're super glad that you're joining us. As Jocelyn said, we realize it's sort of unprecedented times, and we're excited to be here with you today and share some really exciting news about a new workflow pain point solver and really some exciting stuff that we've got in store. So I'll start by sharing my slide deck, and we'll take you through just a quick brief overview of really the topic of obviously color grading on into finishing and mastering packaging. So without further ado, when you think about the end-to-end ecosystem of shooting content and planning for an HDR delivery, obviously the main sort of magic happens in color grading, where the colorist creates the HDR look, you know, sets the contrast and the brightness and the color gamut to be more expansive than SDR. And oftentimes, they then would create the Dolby Vision dynamic metadata, which is a shot-by-shot metadata that can contain upwards of 20 or 30 values per shot. You know, it's an automatic process, but it's also then colorist approved and colorist adjusted. And so that sort of separates Dolby Vision from regular HDR10 or HDR10 Plus, that the colorist can really make those adjustments and dial in their look. From there, your project usually travels through mastering. It may also go to a finishing pass, which we'll discuss. Might, you know, have versioning things. Certainly needs to get packaged with audio, subtitles, you know, to create all your deliverables. And then, of course, it likely needs to get QC'd before it goes through encoding, and then obviously some form of delivery. Maybe it's Netflix with OTT, and then to the consumers. And we'll talk a little bit more about the benefits of Dolby Vision dynamic metadata and sort of the challenges you face with having picture, you know, frame-by-frame picture plus frame-by-frame or shot-by-shot metadata that is traveling along with it. Obviously, they have to remain in sync to the consumer. So in terms of, you know, the latest developments, we're super excited that, you know, Autodesk Flame 2021 is now one of those partners that really delivers top quality tools and the latest version of the Dolby Vision algorithms, which is version 4.0 for shorthand. One of the things to note, you also need an HDR mastering monitor, and most people would use the integrated software CMU. And essentially, we came out with the external CMU hardware box, and that currently does not support version 4.0. So for today's example, we'll be really focusing in on the software CMU integration, and I'm sure that's what Adam will be mostly referring to, and will as well. So really the process starts by a colorist creating the full HDR color grade. So in this instance, this could be a Flame system, or it could be something else like a Resolve or a Baselight system. But this full-on HDR color grade, let's say this is a 1-hour show and you're used to spending 4 days creating that color grade, you would spend the 4 days working on the HDR version. And then you run the automatic shot-by-shot Dolby Vision analysis on the timeline. It's pretty quick. On a UHD project that's 1 hour, it takes about an hour. You know, mileage may vary based on the speed of your GPUs and your CPU, et cetera, and RAM. But it's pretty quick. And then from that automatic analysis, you end up with what we call Dolby Vision L1 metadata, which represents the minimum pixel brightness, the average pixel brightness, and the maximum pixel brightness for that shot. And this is really the foundation of what Dolby Vision is and what it delivers to the television. And then the colorist may typically want to check that mapping, that automatic mapping. Again, you could use an eCMU, but in this case, we're going to go with an iCMU, the internal CMU, that's connected to a second monitor at mapped to the furthest possible point away from your, say, 2000 or 1000 nit master, and that would be SDR 100 nit Rec 709. And so the colorist looks at the mapping. Basically, the CMU is mapping it down to that lesser color gamut and lesser luminance, and the colorist can see if he or she likes that mapping. And if he or she does not, that's where you can start to get into some of the trim controls. And most colorists will tell you that the Dolby Vision process gives you a very good mapping to SDR and may require some slight tweaks. So in my example here, you see the first shot, maybe there's some trims, you know, lift gamma gain, chroma weight. You might want to clip some highlights, whatever you're thinking. And then shot 2, there's no trim. The colorist felt it was fine, didn't need a trim. And then shot 3, they added this trim. Basically, that's all there really is to it. We do also have in version 4.0 a new secondary set of trim controls, which allows you to adjust the hue and saturation of RGB CYM in that sense that, you know, you can get in and sort of handle individual colors. And that's super important when you're going from, say, P3 color gamut down to Rec 709. You may want to adjust the reds. Maybe they shift a little magenta and you want to bring them back. So basically that's it for the trim pass. It goes pretty quickly. Typically a 1-hour show would take you half a day. And you've then created L1 and L8 metadata. Optionally, you could also do another trim pass, depending on what your studio spec says. Some people like to do a 600 nit trim pass because a lot of the consumer TVs out there are 600 nits, and so it's a good representation. But it's not required. The values are interpolated between your 1000 nit master and your 100 nit trim pass. And again, once you've done these, you've created basically anchor points. And so the CMU is actually acting like the chip in the television. So in my example here, if you had a 600 nit trim pass, the TV that is a 425 nit consumer Dolby Vision TV would interpolate the values between 100 and 600 nits and thus map correctly to the capability of that TV. And so again, the whole process of Dolby Vision is to best maintain artistic intent across a wide variety of televisions and mobile devices. And so that's how we do it through the shot-by-shot metadata. Once you're done, you basically export your image sequence, either as a ProRes file or say a 16-bit TIFF sequence, and the very small Dolby Vision metadata that contains the shot-by-shot analysis and trims. That would then move into the mastering workflow. Now, typically you would use a tool like Flame or Cortex Transcoder, et cetera, to create your IMF or your mezzanine package that you would say deliver to Netflix. This is where you would combine audio, you might add the Netflix logo, for instance, et cetera, et cetera. So these tools are super, super powerful, but sometimes you get into a situation where once you're done color grading and your colorist has moved on to another project and that room is occupied, someone wants to do more finishing, either versioning, alternate shots, changing the length of a shot, maybe adding titles, censorship type issues. And so those are the types of things you probably would need to send back to another system and have it changed in color grading. But now in the world that we're going to be discussing today with Flame, you can do these things in a mastering finishing workflow as a one-way trip. You can go from your color grading system, say Resolve, and then add a new shot, take out a shot, add a new shot, add a title to it, swap out a shot, and then add the Dolby Vision metadata and the trims. And this really is very unique and a huge workflow time saver. And I'm going to let Adam and Will really take it from there to describe all those details. But again, that's sort of the exciting news, is that you're not really needing to go back to color grading to handle that. Once you're done with your final mezzanine package, you then basically encode it. So in a case like a show like Netflix Chef's Table, it gets encoded at Netflix, and all the people that have a Dolby Vision TV get the Dolby Vision streams. Anybody that has an HDR10 only TV would get the HDR10 version, and anyone that has an SDR Rec 709 TV would just get that. So from one single master, you're able to deliver very efficiently and encode your solution. So that's it for me. I'll turn it over to Will. I made it in under 15 minutes, Will. I'm really proud of that.
That was great, Tom. Thank you for that introduction, and for really, for setting the table there. That was great.
You got it. And we'll be online answering questions all throughout. We'll be with you for the duration.
All right. So yeah, I wanted to take folks through a little bit about Flame. If you're not so familiar with Flame, it's really a multifaceted tool, a nonlinear editing tool, as well as a compositing tool with some serious depth to it. But don't forget that multi-layer timeline. That's certainly a thing that is relevant to a Dolby Vision workflow. But so there's lots of different ways of using Flame, whether it's 3D environment scenes, CG compositing. These are all totally valid use cases. It's hard to find one person that does it all. Different people use it in different ways, and that's okay. It's a full procedural compositing environment there, where you could be doing keying, you could be doing comping, you could be doing quite detailed work, as well as paint fix work, if that was your bag. In terms of new features recently, we've got some cool new GPU accelerated defocus functions, taking a depth input. But we also have an environment here that looks a bit like a kind of a color grading or effects environment, where you can do shapes and color and keying. And speaking of keying, we've got some machine learning, some artificial intelligence tools that can do some pretty clever keying. So like identifying the human body, including occlusions, for example, or defining normals for a live action face to give you a matte that you could then relight that face with. This is kind of grading plus or cool stuff that you can do right there in the timeline in Flame. This is another example of isolating the human body, where you could be, you could be picking, choosing. You can even isolate features on a face. This is all done through machine learning from a large data set, accelerated on the GPU, and allows you to do beautification as well as color work, all part of the compositing as well as grading and finishing world that most of our customers live in. Specific to Dolby Vision then, so you've got a multi-layer timeline. You might have a graded layer as well as a base layer perhaps. And you might want to import either someone else's HDR metadata for Dolby, or generate your own if you like. You can bring your metadata in, sync it to your timeline, or do a completely fresh analysis if you need. Or if, let's say, you had a brand new shot that came in, inserted, you could analyze that shot, blend them together. Then the HDMI tunneling, as well as ICMU, is a way to be able to directly connect to a consumer TV and see your trims live as you work. This is a very typical way for people to work with Flame, with a good quality monitor attached. We also support the 4.0 algorithms, and then export the XML as well as a mezzanine master as well. But I'm going to let Adam tell you more about that in just a few minutes. Just to recap then, Flame version 2021 already released. That was our big launch of Dolby Vision in Flame. We also had some of these cool AI tools. And we also did an update just this past June, adding some more usability stuff and more format support. So the latest version of Flame is this version 2021.1 update. Specific to Dolby then, I just want to call out the standards that we support. You can bring in as well as export that XML. You can connect to eCMUs if you'd like to, but you can also use that iCMU, the soft CMU function, to preview, as well as export if you want to actually bake in the look of your trims. Let's say for a 600 nit QuickTime temp file, you could do that. And then you can also connect via HDMI tunneling directly to a Dolby-enabled consumer TV. We think that the big advantages then are having the multi-layer timeline, where you can put graphics in line before or after your HDR analysis. You can make changes to editorial. You could change the dissolve to a wipe. You could reanalyze after a one frame ripple propagated trim and realign those events. And that's hopefully Adam is going to give us all the down low on that. And then there's also some tools to fix problem events. Like let's say you had a time ramp that stops and comes down to normal speed and then cuts in editorial to the normal speed shot. That's two events in Dolby, but you might not want those two events. You might want to blend those two shots into one. And that's another thing that can be done in that multi-layer timeline. All right, so that's it from me. If you want to learn more about Flame, there is a 30-day trial and an educational version available. Coming over to you, Adam, to show us how all this cool stuff works. Thanks,
Will. So I'll introduce myself. I'm obviously Adam. I've been I'm the technical director and senior Flame artist at Blue Post Sydney. And I've been on Flame for about 20 years. I actually started off on Fire when I moved over, but before that I was using, the good old days of Henry and edit boxes, and I even did a bit of linear 1-inch, machine-to-machine type stuff. Anyway, I've been at Blue Post now for 5 years, and Blue Post, we just focus on long form, specifically high-end drama and series work. Now, we've been Dolby Vision certified for 2 years. This is our lovely award. No, that's our plaque, but I would like to thank my wife and family for all their support. Anyway, I'll talk a bit about the Australian market first before I get into the Flame stuff. So we're quite a small market in Australia. So the Australian population is only 25 million. So up until, the advent of streaming services, it really was the local broadcasters that were, you know, funding the local content. So it was very limited opportunities there. So with the advent of all the streaming services, it's really opened an international market up to local production companies. And in particular, the streaming services like a point of difference. And really that's where, you know, 4K and HDR really comes to the fore. So for us, it was a no-brainer really to move to Dolby Vision certification because that allowed local production companies to have a greater chance of on-selling to the international market. So that's kind of allowed more funding to come in. So now budgets are bigger for a start. There's definitely a lot more productions happening now in Australia. So it's been a real game changer for the local market in what we specialise in. Now, before I start sharing the screen, I'd just like to thank Playmaker, who's a local production company we do a lot of work with here in Sydney. But they've allowed us to use footage from a series called The Commons. It's kind of fitting really actually, because The Commons was a show about, you know, heading towards an apocalyptic kind of environment where there's massive dust storms and there's actually a pandemic going on. So it's funny, after it went to air earlier this year, we had those massive bushfires in Australia. And so there were big dust comp shots and everyone was going, well, they probably weren't far enough. And now we're in the middle of COVID. So yeah, quite interesting. But anyway, so at Blue Post, we like to be quite flexible. And so each project's a bit different for us, but generally the workflow is the same. And getting the Dolby Vision tools in Flame in particular allows us a lot more flexibility than we had previously. So up until the Flame tools came in, I was having to finish in Resolve a lot, and we just found it a bit limiting in terms of what we could do. Really liking the new tools, and I've already finished a couple of series in there, and we've got, you know, several Dolby Vision projects happening in the next several months. So it's going to be very busy. Anyway, so I'll share my screen. All right, so first of all, I'll just talk about where we grade in our setup. So we're grading in DaVinci Resolve, and we're actually using Resolve Color Management. Now, there is the option to go the ACES route, and for us, it doesn't quite suit. It just adds an extra layer of complexity that we really feel we don't need. So we work in P3D65 with obviously the ST2084 PQ gamma curve, which is basically essential for Dolby Vision. Now, you could go Rec 2020, but there really aren't any monitors that are displaying the full gamut of Rec 2020. So we've chosen to go the P3D65 route. So all our monitors are calibrated to that. We can see, you know, the full gamut there. You know, ACES comes into its own when you're doing lots of big CGI stuff and there's lots of heavy compositing going on. It's definitely worthwhile going the ACES route in those sort of circumstances, but we find that mostly the majority of our VFX work is clean up on the source media. We don't actually typically do CGI in-house, so we'll deal with other vendors. So we'll send material out, and if they so choose to work in ACES, they can and send us back, and we discuss at the time which way we're going to get that back. But the way we work for our VFX is we actually tend to work in the camera, well, the main camera default color space. So we're tending to find that the majority of our shows are, say, shot on Sony Venice now. I'd say 80 to 90% of them are shooting on Venice. that uses the XOCN codec, which is a raw codec, and we transfer that into the Sony S-Gamut3 Cine color space with the S-Log3 gamma curve. So when we do work pre-grade, we're actually working that S-Log and S-Gamma color space. Once again, Flame's fantastic for that, because if you tag the color space you're seeing in that default color space, so you know, any pre-grade stuff, we do that, get it back in the Sony color space and feed that into our Resolve color management for the grade. Obviously, sometimes we might be working in red. We might have, you know, with Panasonic VariCam's another one we've had. Drone stuff has got its own color space, like for instance, the DJI has its own color space and gamut. So sometimes we treat that on a shot-by-shot basis, but that's overall how we work. So getting to the grade, as you can see, that's kind of the settings we have. We work in Dolby Vision version 4. Now, the reason we do that is we find we've got more control, it's a better result, and there are tools which I'll talk about later, which Dolby have created that actually can create a backwards compatible XML for the version 2.9, and we've done a lot of testing with that, and we find it's really good. It's a really good representation. Obviously, certain aspects of version 4 can't transfer across, but most of it is there. We work at, our mastering monitor is a Sony BVM X300, which is a peak luminance of 1000 nits. We love it, it looks fantastic. And to be honest, once you get over 1000 nits, it tends to be specular highlights. So we don't feel a real need to go further, although obviously Dolby Vision supports up to 4000 nits. I haven't seen a 4000 nits monitor, but I'd be interested what the differences between the X300 are. For our client monitors and in our Flame suites, we're actually using the LG C8s, and you do have the option to use HDMI tunneling if you're working 2.9, but because we choose to work in version 4, the tunneling isn't supported at this stage as far as I'm aware in anything. So we actually, and I won't get into all the special sauce, but we actually feed our LGs the SDI signal, and we've got we're a very smart man down in Melbourne, one of our colorists, Marcus Hopton-Smith, he does all our calibration as well. And he really has our LG C8 singing. So, you know, if you jump between the X300 and looking at the C8s, you really can't see a difference. Yeah, the really top specular highlights you can't see, but the rest of it just looks, you know, it's sensational. I should also mention that in terms of time, we're finding it's about usually 3 days for, you know, your HDR grade. And that's fantastic. You get the client coming in, approving the grade. Then post that, when we do our SDR analysis, that's including a client watch through taking about half a day. So it's really a short period of time in addition to your normal grade to get that SDR trim pass that is Dolby related. Now, we actually choose to use Dolby Vision for everything, even if there isn't a Dolby Vision deliverable. So say we're only delivering HDR10 and SDR, we will still use the Dolby Vision tools because it's faster than us doing a HDR grade and then, you know, taking that and then trying to do an SDR grade. The analysis is that good with the Dolby Vision, especially version 4, that, you know, sometimes the colorist is only touching several shots. So it really is fantastic. So I'll just do a quick step through there just to show you the difference between the different gamuts. So you can see the larger triangle's the Rec 2020, but as far as I'm aware, there isn't a monitor that can actually display the whole gamut there yet. I believe there's laser projectors that can, but people aren't viewing on laser projectors, so we don't, you know, feel that that's the way to go. So you can see that the DCI P3 is kind of the middle-sized triangle, and it's interesting because Netflix, as a good example, they want their HDR deliveries in the DCI P3 with a D65 white point. So that's basically what we're delivering. Now, I've basically talked about that. Another thing that Tom touched on as well was the ICMU or eCMU discussion. So basically, he's outlaid it. The ICMU is basically a software-based internal CMU. We actually have an eCMU as well, but for us, we haven't really had a need to do it now. Now, it could come in handy, and as Tom mentioned, it's only supporting 2.9 currently, but there are ways to display HDR and SDR at the same time, which was one of the reasons we originally were using the eCMU, but it really depends on your preference. We've sometimes found that you need a lot of adjustment, but when you're watching HDR, then switching to SDR. So sometimes having them side by side could cause you more problems than it solves. I mean, it's nice to have that confidence there, but for us, we tend to stick in HDR, get the grade approved in HDR, have the clients walk away. Even the colorist has to walk away for 10 minutes to get used to it. And when they come back and do the SDR trims, we're looking in SDR. Yeah, sometimes that might be different on preference, but that's the way we're working here in Sydney.
That's great. Just to jump in there, I have seen a lot of colorists will do the lunch break between those two passes. They'll actually, want to clear the palette completely and go outside and get lunch and then come back. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's important because we have seen in early days, especially when you've got clients that aren't so used to seeing the HDR, and they'd come in and their minds would suddenly blow, and they couldn't deal with the differences and switching between them. They didn't know what they were looking at and were getting confused. And it's really interesting as well that, we've had several DAPs in particular have come in and gone, oh, I hate HDR, I don't like it. And then in the end, they don't know what they're looking at. But
it's definitely the more advanced you get over time as a colorist and maybe a client, you can look at both simultaneously and live in both worlds. But as someone maybe getting started and newer to the process, it's often best to separate the two with a little bit of a break.
Yeah, I agree on that. All right, so I'll bring something in. So here we are in Flame now. I won't bother, obviously, going through anyone else's tools. We're just focusing on this. So I have, just for this webinar, got some select images here. So here's just a little conform. Now, one thing I'll point out in this webinar is because we're viewing everything in sRGB, all the HDR images will actually look really flat and dull. And that's because you're viewing them on an SDR display. When you view them on a HDR display, it obviously completely comes to life. So I'll show you now with an ICMU just how different it is. But the SDR footage will actually look better than the HDR footage when we're doing this. So first things first is project setup. I'll just quickly show you this. I'm just working in UHD, 16-bit floating point. You have to monitor in progressive, so that is, I mean, UHD is progressive anyway, but that is one specification for Dolby Vision, so you can't be PSF or I, so that's pretty simple stuff. In my color management preferences, this is really important. Now, I have seen a couple of the Autodesk videos, and they seem more focused on working in Rec 2100. Now, as I mentioned, we're working in the P3D65 PQ, so my setups are slightly different. So you can see here, my working color space, my broadcast color space, and my monitoring color space are all in the ST2484 PQ, which is obviously the Dolby gamma curve, and that's the color space. For those who might not see in the navigation, it's all pretty good here anyway. In this working color space, if you go to displays ST2084, that's where you'll find the DCI P3 D65, just in case you ever get lost. Because there is this DCI P3, that is incorrect. It has to be this one down here, just so that you know. Another important thing is scopes. So obviously you've got your settings here. In my, I've created preset for HDR. I think in the ACES preset that might exist already, but I've created my own. But the big thing here is in this waveform, I want to select the PQ one, so I'm seeing the up to 1000 nit instead of the standard PQ. Keep in mind as well, this is not a linear scope; it's a logarithmic. So you know it's not even steps between here, between 100 and 1000. It's logarithmic. So you know 200 might be kind of more in the middle somewhere, just so that you know, and you don't get confused. On the vector scope, I'm also using this Dolby vector scope here. So that's that. Now, I've obviously got my cuts here in a situation where they might not have done the SDR trim pass in grade yet, and I've got to get a file out for sound. It's as simple as me coming here, HDR, create HDR track. Now, it's blank here at this stage because I haven't done any analysis. So I can select any of these. And so this is my full HDR tool set. Now I'll quickly talk through what's available in here. So you got your Dolby Vision version. So as I said, we tend to work in Dolby Vision 4. You can see the display's changed, but I haven't analyzed this yet. We'll talk about that in a sec. Now, once again, you have the selection for iCMU. If I wanted to, I could select the eCMU, but I'm not doing that. Because I know the mastering display that we've done is the P3D65. That's what I'm selecting at. I should also note that when I bring in my footage, which is this here, I'm also very much working in a tagged color space. So in here, you can see in this input that it is the ST2084 PQ DCI P3 color space. You really need to make sure your footage is tagged correctly, or else you'll get yourself into trouble very quickly. If not, you can also have the option, obviously, in your color preferences. You can actually, in the color management, you've got the rules if you want to set up your own defaults there, but I'm pretty adamant of when I'm exporting and everything to go into Flame that I've got everything tagged correctly. So yeah, anyway. So generally the initial analysis, you'll have your mastering display and you will use this 100 nit BT709, BT1886 target display, which is the default one. We don't bother doing our 600 nit trim passes. We found that, you know, it's good from all our testing. The 600 nits just works. There's some other setup things here, which is like where you might install your Dolby license. What I will add is that you can do in Flame analysis on the shots, but you just cannot do any trims without a Dolby license. And the Dolby license works, it's a site license. So once your site is licensed, you can use it on any instances of software within the facility. So this is where you import your license, and you've got a Dolby config here. So anyway, here getting back to the purpose of exporting something for sound, I'm just going to analyze all the shots here. So I'm going to do that. Now, Flame's really quick, I found on this system. So I'm running a Z840 with a P5000 GPU. The analysis is basically double real time in speed. So it actually takes half. So for you know, a 40-minute show, it's taking me about 20 minutes to do an analysis. So it's pretty fast. Bang, there we go. So that's my SDR there, which you can see, and I could quickly drop down underneath to see my HDR path. So it's just a matter of changing layers to switch between my SDR and HDR. And I've got a quick way of changing my displays in the suite between HDR and SDR. So we can preview both quickly if we so choose to switch between them. Now, just so I can explain what this layer is doing, I'll just pull this aside a bit. So here, I've got a PQ track, and all this is doing is basically tagging everything underneath as being having a PQ gamma curve. And that's just to ensure that we're doing the SDR analysis that it is correct. So now if I was happy with this, I can just export this for sound with the trim pass. So it's just as simple as, you know, dragging that across. We've got this distribution package choices here. So you've got, you know, Dolby Vision. So I can create a preview master at ProRes, or, you know, that's their presets. But if you so choose, you've still got the options of going into your movie options, and say they wanted an MXF at whatever, you can still do that easily. Okay, so that's that. If I wanted to do a quick pass, so I'm going to trash these tracks here. I actually now have got my my pass from the colorist, so I'm going to import the HDR track. So now this is the trim pass from the actual colorist. So I've just replaced that quick and easily. So once again, I can step through. We're all pretty happy, fantastic. One thing to note when you do import that, I just might do that again, is you do have some options here when you do import the track. So here you can set an offset. So for some reason, say you've changed the start time code of your sequence and it's different to what the XML file is, you can create an offset to line them up. You've also got these frame data handling. Now, you can exclude animated trims and transition trims. Now, what that basically is if you've got a dissolve in Resolve, what happens in the Dolby metadata is there's a frame per frame baked in keyframes for the Dolby values. That's how it creates it. So I tend to bring everything in with this, including frame-based transition trims when I bring it in. I don't actually have any dissolves in this, so I can't really show you that, but that's essentially what that does. Oh, one other thing. Sorry, I'm jumping around a bit here too. In this tool as well, this bit's important too. So you've got an active image area. So most shows we're finding are actually coming in at 2:1. And so by having this ratio here at 2, it's only analysing the shots within the letterbox. It's not doing the whole frame, because if it took the black into account, it'd be an incorrect result. So that's an important part of that as well. Now, from this point here, obviously I've got my capabilities to do see the HDR as well as the SDR. Now, the beauty of having this layer-based workflow now is I can simply add a track on here, and now I can add whatever I want and build on top of my base HDR layer, and I can still check the trims against it. Now, one common thing that used to happen in SDR world, and obviously still happens in HDR world, is they've approved the grade, they come into the online suite, and they suddenly decide that they want to change a grade. So the beauty of this is it's really easy having these Flame tools to go, yep, no worries, I can do that. Because you know how, you know, producers and directors have, you know, more patience than COVID-19. So to tell them, oh yeah, okay, we're going to go back into the grade, and sorry, they're in another session for now. We'll have to leave it for tomorrow. You know, it removes that flexibility. So being able to just quickly jump in here and they go, oh yeah, no, whatever. We want to raise the gamma. We want to pull some of the red out. You know, it's really quick for me to do that in my base layer. Now you notice on my top HDR layer that it's turned yellow. Now what that does, which is the fantastic thing about the Flame toolset, is I can instantly see if something's changed. So here and see, oh, okay, this is different to what it was before. I know what I've just done there. So I can either choose to keep this, but since I've changed the grade, I really should reanalyze. Now I've got quite a few options here. So if I know a shot's pretty much going to be the same and I don't want to waste time analyzing, I can just make it color current frame. Obviously current shot, I can do a selection of shots, all shots as I did before, and I'll get to blend shots in a bit. But here I can simply reanalyze this shot. It's nice and quick. Bang. Yeah, am I happy with that? Yeah, I think I am. Cool. So then I can keep it. Well, in this case, it's automated that already. But say I now want to do trims, and once again, these trim controls is where you need the license. So if you don't have the license, then you won't get access to these controls. It's only analysis. So if I did want to change that, I can so change it to adjust to while the client's in the room. So this is fantastic. As I said in the past, it would be go back into the grade suite. We then have to create a whole new XML, re-export it, pull that in, and basically you're re-looking at it. So to be able to do these quick adjustments in Flame is fantastic. Now, the other thing you'd probably do a lot of, and I'm just trying to keep an eye on time, is, you know, obviously you've got graphics and things that you want to add. Excuse me. So here, I'll just quickly add a little text, and I'll just load one that I've made earlier. So here we go, Tom. So this is the head of Dolby Vision. That's giving him his nice credit where it's deserved. Now, this looks kind of okay in here, but remember, we're not looking at that at HDR. So this is literally going to burn a hole in your monitor. So the beauty, once again, of Flame is I've got the color management. So I'm going to, in here, do an input transfer from this one, Rec 709, into the ST2084 gamma curve. So that is pretty much sitting at 100 nits, which you can see here on the scopes, sitting at 100 nits in HDR land. Now, one thing to note is obviously that's doing the whole shot. So I've got to make my text RGBA, so it's got the alpha. And so I'm only applying the color management now to my text. And then on top of this, I might just add a color correct node and, you know, add some gain. I find sitting about 125 is a good level. And remember, once again, this is a logarithmic scope. So even though it looks like that's sitting at 500 nits, it's actually closer to 200. 200 nits is roughly a good white point. So depending on what you want to do, you might adjust that. So obviously, another beauty about this workflow is I can quickly jump between the two to see if it works. Previously, having to bake in graphics into the ungraded material was quite a pain, because you'd be surprised, you'd look at a shot ungraded and you think, oh, that can go over the background there. And then when you suddenly look on a HDR monitor, the background's way too bright and you can't see it. So, you know, that's a really quick way of looking at text. The other beauty now of a Dolby Vision world, when you're not delivering Dolby Vision, is say I've got this and I want to deliver an SDR master and a HDR10 master. Now, I might want to treat the graphics slightly different in my SDR version than my HDR version. So it's really easy for me to bring that up above my HDR, my SDR conversion, my ICMU here. I can switch that off, turn my color management off, and then I could treat the SDR graphics slightly different to the HDR if I so chose. And then, so when I deliver my HDR 10 version, I'd come down here, deliver that. So that's that version. In my SDR version, I've got my graphic for that. Obviously, with other graphics as well, a big problem is you getting them supplied at sRGB quite often, or Rec 709. So I've just got a local Screen Australia. They're kind of like the government funding agency here. So I'll turn this back on and that off. So here I've got Screen Australia, add the mat. Sorry. What's going on here? Come on, add mat. All right, there we go. So once again, I'll have it unpre-multiplied. This is way too bright, so it's very easy then for me to just grab my color management and my color correction on there, drop it on there, and bang, I'm done for that. And when I look at this version, I've got my Screen Australia logo how I want it. So that's really easy. So another thing that might happen, obviously, and because I've changed underneath and added the layer, or that's invalidated the analysis. So, or well, not invalidated, it's just warned me that basically something's changed underneath. So I can just select them all and go keep, and I'm all cool again. Now, something else might happen, which is all the times, and they say, all right, we want to trim, you know, time off this first shot. It's just too long. So once again, with the ripple, I'm going to use the trim. It's really easy for me to shrink this back. And that obviously invalidates the HDR layer. So it's no longer in sync. But the beauty of the Flame tools as well is I can select this HDR, update HDR track, and bang, it creates a new HDR track. It's muting the old ones. So the old one's there if I want to check anything, but I can basically go through and it's aligned all my trims with the original material, which is fantastic. And the thing I like particular about the Flame is it's so verbose. I can see what's going on. That's all fine. And when I'm happy, once again, I can just select it all and then keep it. So it's a really quick way of doing versioning. And then, you know, since I'm happy, I can just scrap that. You can add dissolves in the base layer. I'm sure that's going to be a question that's asked. Now, what Flame does is it'll interpolate the results. Now, it's not showing that correctly here, but basically if I export that and bring it in, it does the frame-based transition over the length of the dissolve. So it's really quick to add dissolves and things underneath, and that just works. Now, I'll just undo a few things here. Go back to the original one. That's cool. Now, one other issue that you sometimes get, which I'll show you, and this is another great way why this being so verbose, is I've got a situation here where there was two shots, which are basically essentially the first one. So the same shot. So the first one's a comp shot where that's been comped in, and the second one is an analysis of the shot without. So obviously to save time, we don't want to send out the whole shot as a VFX. We only send out the part that we want comped. So once again, it's very easy just to, if I want to, I'll turn ripple off. I can just trash that second analysis and adjust the timeline. So you can basically treat the metadata as if it's an editorial timeline. Another option you have as well, which I'll get to as well, is this blend functionality. So if you're kind of wondering, oh, which one's the one to keep, I can actually keep the blend shots, reanalyze those, and it'll do a blend between the two analysis. So now if I step through, it's the same. So that's a really fantastic tool as well. Another thing I really love about Flame, for troubleshooting this thing is this head and tails view. So here I can quickly, looking through my timeline, each edit, here it shows the first frame and the last frame of each edit. So here I can immediately see that this is the same shot, and so I need to take a look at that just to make sure that there's not a problem. This is something that can easily slip through the gaps here. So that's really handy feature that I use all the time before checking my outputs. So once again, now I'll just trash that, bring this across. Now in this particular case, we've got a logo that they've seen that they want to remove, that shouldn't be there. So it's really easy for me to come into batch effects. I've actually got a quick comp for this. So basically I've got my, my patch here. So I've just done a 1-frame patch, tracked it over the top, but they might want to insert a new logo over the top of this thing here. Now, obviously looking at that in a flat P3D65 thing, it's going to be hard for me to gauge colors. So in batch, you've also got the HDR toolset. So I can actually, oh, just wait, I seem to have frozen up here. All right, so, all right. So I've got my HDR node here, so I can simply plug that in, set this as a context view. In this case, I can come into here. I've obviously got to make sure it's mapped, but in this case, I can have it however I want. But generally, you'd have that information. I can analyze it. And then, so if I'm bringing in a new logo, such as ours, maybe, here, obviously, I'd want to add a color management node because it's a Rec 709 logo. So I want to put that into the P3D65 space. I've got that. I can then just add it to here, you know, without getting too crazy here. I might just move it over to the window. I'll do a really dodgy position there and scale. Cool. My surface, I might just make this one max lighten. And then I might just duplicate that quickly and make this one, this is just obviously rough and dirty, make that a blend just to get a sense of that in the window. And then if I want to, I can just look at my context view to see what it's like, so that if I need to make any color adjustments, I can. Because I'm not feeding my batch effects node, obviously that's just a viewing thing that I use, but it's really great, especially when you're using freelancers. And at Bluepost, we tend to utilize a lot of Flame freelancers to do a lot of our overflow work, because we like to keep a very small team to keep our flexibility and viability as well. Like, you know, you've seen a lot of the big VFX companies going under because they've got to maintain these massive salary expenditure. But for us, we have a really talented core team, and then we've got a series of Flame freelancers that we utilize heavily. So most of those guys don't have HDR monitoring, so this is a really great way post-grade. I talked pre-grade where they'd be working as in the S-log color space in this example, but post-grade, if we need to send them things, it's very easy for them to use this HDR tool to revise their comps. But that's that for that. And obviously here, because we've got this layer version, if we are getting shots in, we can just get anyone just to quickly throw the grade on. I can, you know, toggle through versions. You know, I'm sure you're, you know, the Flame guys are aware of the pattern browsing scenario. So it's a really great way of managing VFX in your mastering session as opposed to in Resolve. Now, if I'm happy with my master thing, I know I'm kind of been going for half an hour now. versioning is really simple. So say my main version here, and I'll just quickly, once again, keep everything. So I'm happy with everything now. That's all cool. If I've got versions, say quite often we'll have like a delivery to a local broadcaster, and then we might have an international sale. They've got slightly different needs. It's very easy for us then to, you know, then create a duplicate, and then maybe this one I'll just call, you know, B and CD, because I've got to add bars and countdown. So I'll open that. You know, this one I've got to change my start time to 1 hour, so I've reformatted that to be a 1 hour start now. I've got to put bars on, so, you know, there. Sorry. So I might just want to put, you know, my bars on here. No, so that automatically extends the PQ. My clock leader I might have to have on there too, so on and so forth. Obviously, I need HDR metadata for the whole thing, so it's very easy for me just to add the HDR gap effect and analyze that. In this case, I don't really want to do it, the whole thing. I can just do a current frame and that'll work for all of it. Now you've noticed here that, oh, the color bars are awful for my SDR version. Well, once again, the beauty of Flame is if I want, I can just on my SDR version, I'll unmute that. I just put on the bars again on the top. So when I export my color bars for the SDR things, it's correct. While in the old version, when I'm creating my content mapped SDR export, I'd then have to edit in the bars and everything again, using something like, say, CineX, which we use a lot here. So that's fantastic for versioning. So I kind of talked about the different ways you can export. It's very easy now for me with this new timeline. If I want, I can publish it. I've got, you know, in my versions, Dolby Vision, I've got my 2.9 master. So that'll actually, or my 4.0 master. I would be, because I've been working in 4.0, I would be exporting the 4.0 master. Now, when I export this, it creates the XML, 4.0 XML as well as the Vision. I will quickly do it because it doesn't take too long for that. Why is that doing that? Oh, I'm not sure that's not working, but anyway. What I can do, oh, that's why, silly me, dragged the wrong thing. So I export that. Now, so it's pretty quick at exporting. It'll tag all the media correctly, and it produces both the Dolby 4 XML and the mastering sequence. From that, if I wanted to, I can create SDRs in another software package. There are a few things that you do want to do in the Dolby toolset. So I'll quickly jump across to that. So I just have a bookmark here. They're command line tools. I won't get into that too much because I've got a shortened version of it. But one tool that is quite important, and I will just quickly do this, is Dolby Webinar. I'll just find one of the XMLs.
Hey, Adam.
Yep.
Sorry to interrupt you. I think because you're sharing the Flame screen, we're seeing a black screen. You'd have to,
okay. All right. I won't get into that too much then, because we're kind of running short of time. But I'll show you in the Metaphor. Let me go this. There's a whole lot of useful commands here that I will do post my export. So the top one's the one I was going to show, but I won't bother because there's lots of Dolby information on their website about all this. So I'd recommend doing that instead of being part of this webinar. But basically, the top one here is a really important one. It basically validates the Dolby Vision XML. So it'll go through, tell you all the information that you need to do. So you want to double check that. It's very verbose. There's plenty of that online, so I won't get into that. Keeping an eye on the time. The following commands are quite important as well. So the ones in particular is this, what the -O in this kind of syntax does is it creates a new XML. So here I'm saying that any modifications is going to be called this. This is my previous XML file. So this one's an important one. So the update CM29 metadata, what it does is it takes the version 4 metadata, does this brilliant conversion to 2.9. So when you're viewing it in the Dolby Vision 2.9, the results is very, very close to the version 4. Aspect ratios is important. I found XMLs out of Flame and nail this, but out of other software packages, they've been wrong. So this is where I was showing before in terms of the analysis. The first one's the canvas and the second one's the image size. So this is saying it's a 2:1 aspect within a 16:9 frame. Color encoding is important as well. So if I have to create my Rec 2020 deliverable as well, I can do that. So when I export my master here, I might, in my video options there, use a LUT and then do an import transform. And from here, I would be doing a ST2084 to a Rec 2100 PQ. Now what that does is it actually sits the P3D65 master within that Rec 2100 bucket. So you're not losing anything. It just means on a Rec 2020 monitor, you will see what we've been seeing the whole time along in the P3D65. But obviously the metadata doesn't work for that because it's based on a P3D65. Sorry about that. Slides again. Yeah, it's basically based on the P3D65. So doing this color encoding conversion, oh, sorry, that should be BT 2020. But anyway, it will convert it to BT 2020 metadata values. So it will display correctly for that converted image. And finally, the source version is if a distributor does require a 2.9 XML, you can use this to just create a 2.9 only XML. And you can include the update CM29 metadata in that as well. But anyway, I think that's kind of enough of an overview. I hope I've covered anything. Was there anything else that you thought of, Will, that you wanted to show?
No, I guess I just wanted to point out the obvious here, which is that you're future-proofing yourself by working in 4.0, and then you've got these, these automated tools to convert it, the Dolby tools, which are doing a really cool stuff there. And then one day, I guess, when you want to actually deliver a 4.0 show, you just won't use these tricks. Is that right?
That's correct. And one other thing that we haven't actually done yet because our grade suite's too busy with actual HDR shows. But the fact in Flame that you can actually work with this trim pass is if you've got a show that, say, doesn't have a budget for a full HDR delivery, there's nothing saying that if they've got the budget to do the trim pass in the grade and they can afford the cost of an LTO tape or two, that you wouldn't do the grade in HDR, do your SDR trims, and then finish everything in Flame, in SDR. And when you archive the Flame project, it obviously archives the HDR metadata track. You could always come back at a later time, and it's kind of an inverse what I was doing before, where I did a different version for the SDR. I could actually take these graphics and everything I had, plonk it on the HDR section, and then modify it to create a HDR deliverable at a later stage. So it's really flexible, Flame, having these tools that you can work that way. So once again,
Right.
if there was an SDR finish, you could work in the Dolby Vision workflow and produce a HDR from that at a later point.
And I was answering a question from someone earlier that, you know, above that HDR layer there, you're kind of in SDR land, right? It's like normal video up there.
Yeah, exactly
But
right.
you
So,
could, as you said, duplicate stuff, move stuff down, and I'm not sure if you mentioned that, you know, you could add input LUTs to your graphics and that kind of stuff if you needed to convert them into the native camera color space or the PQ color space. It's all just LUTs.
that's right, exactly. Yeah, color transforms, and the fact that you can work into these multiple layers, it just adds so much more flexibility, as I was saying before. So, having worked pre-Flame Dolby tools, doing any changes could be a really complex process where you have to go back to your non-graded material, apply any changes that you want, take it back into the grade, redo the grade, redo your analysis, see if it works. Oh no, something's wrong. You got to go back, blah, 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 blah. It's a long process. Obviously in Flame, having these tools, the multi-layer, the ability to jump up and down and turn things on and off, it's very quick. Say in this instance, it's very quick for me to, you know, see a before and after just by, you know, switching a layer off. So in terms of client attended sessions, it's just fantastic. And also obviously taking your hero suite with your expensive HDR monitor, you don't have that need to be doing these type of adjustments in your expensive, you know, grading suite. You can do it in Flame just as easily and a lot more efficiently.
Like you said, when you've got like these LG, like the C9 that replicate the Sony X300 reasonably well, it's an option.
Oh, totally. And to be honest, like we haven't had any clients come in and go, oh my God, that looks really different. They're just really happy. They walk from the grading suite, they're coming into the online suite, looking at the C8s, and you know, it's not a problem for them at all.
So that's actually a good point too, that we did have a couple questions about, obviously there is no 4.0 tunneling right now. So can you maybe just speak about how you, just quickly, how you work with a customer in terms of, hey, we're grading your show, we're doing Dolby Vision, we're going to give you a great looking SDR, and how would you then also fit in the LG?
Oh, in terms of how we've got it hooked up in our system currently, or?
Yeah, I mean, what would you want to show them on the LG? Obviously, you can't tunnel in 4.0, so how would you make it happen?
So what we do is we actually send our SDI feed to the LGs, and we're using a LUT box in there in the path to calibrate the monitor how we want. We have done testing, obviously, with the HDMI tunneling, and it works great for 2.9, but because we're working with the 4.0, we don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, obviously, there's options. I mean, there was the Dolby webinar, was it 2 weeks ago, where they also talk about ways of you can encode the metadata and the file so that you can preview the actual Dolby Vision file on devices such as, you know, an Apple iPad Pro, or in our case, you know, we kind of know what clients have. We've done our own testing with the iPad Pro, for instance, as well. And so we might just give them an HDR deliverable. And obviously, a lot of people don't have the option of viewing HDR, so that's where the SDR is great as well. So it's very quick to send a file out to someone for approval when needed. I think there was a question for H.264 MP4s and things. That's as simple as well as if I'm on my top layer, I can just drop that. I can just do your normal, you know, file sequence here, so I can have a quick time H.264. If I'm using the top video track, this is exactly the same as it works for any other thing, because that top video track's the SDR conversion. If I export that, that'll be the ICMU baked in export.
Yeah, so just a follow up. So the question would be, do you take your 1000 nit image and use your LUT box to knock it down to roughly 600 nits for the LG, or do you use the ICMU mapping to get to the 600 nit.
We're using the Lightbox for that, but you could, if you wanted to as well. Obviously, with this great preview function here, it'd be very easy for us to, with the main mode, if we wanted to display, we can switch this as well.
Yeah.
So that is a really handy function as well.
Cool.
As I said, we don't tend to do a separate analysis in the 600 nit because we find the Dolby works so well. But if we did want to preview on a 600 nit display, this is definitely a really quick, just flick of the box and feed in the monitor, and that works a treat too.
That's cool. And do you calibrate your LGs, or are you just kind of a stock out of the box guy?
Calibrated, yeah,
Okay.
we're definitely, yeah. Our colorist down in Melbourne, Marcus Hopton-Smith, he's our calibration guy. He's really gotten into it, and he's done a lot of research, and as I said, he's come up with some special sauce, and we're really happy with the C8. So there's definitely other ways of doing it, and it's that thing. There's no right or wrong. Well, there is wrong, I guess, but the way we're working, it's working really well for us. So yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Great. Special sauce. We can't talk about the special sauce.
It's just, I guess it's the way we're calibrating more than anything. But
yeah,
a lot of it's similar. There, as I said, there was the webinar that you had a couple of weeks ago, Tom, where you kind of mentioned a lot of the things that we're kind of doing here anyway. It's kind of settings for the LG C8
sure,
and
yeah,
C9.
but there is, you know, I did mention the calibration software, but
yeah.
you know, you know, but there is different recipes on how to do this, and I think you probably should do your own testing and your own planning to find the best way for you and your color science and your color engineers to really help with that, for sure.
Exactly.
I'm just curious too, the chair with my name on it in that shot, do I get a chair like that, or how does that work?
Oh yeah, totally. It's on its way.
Great. That is, come on. Who wouldn't want that?
And that's your little display in front, the dome. It kind of projects onto that. So
okay,
it's fantastic.
Hey,
very good.
Hey, Tom. Speaking of getting something, there was a question from Finn, a Flame artist, about sort of how to get certified with Dolby at his facility. And I didn't want to miss answer there. Could you maybe explain a little bit about that? He was asking if there's a cost, or is it more of a certification testing process?
No problem. So just quickly, the annual license, since we had a question about that too, retails at $2,500 per year. And that gives you access to the professional tools, which you can run on any computer in your facility. Those are command line tools. But it also enables the trims inside of, you know, a program like Resolve or Flame. And it gives you sort of unlimited ICMUs in your facility. So if you have 4 Flames and 4 Resolve rigs, you could run ICMU on all of them for $2,500 a year retail. There is also the ability to run 1 eCMU. If you want multiple eCMUs, that is a bit more. Contact us on that. We are running a COVID special, so we know everybody's sort of having a difficult time in the industry, and so we are offering a bit of a discount right now if you're interested. In terms of certification, it's a separate program. It's optional. It's basically a 3-day training course that AB Matthew, who's on the call, leads, and it covers extensively all the different pieces and the ins and outs of analysis, trims, you know, everything like that. And that retails for $2,000 a year, basically. Again, we also have a COVID relief discount on that. So together, most people get them together. So it would be $4,500 per year, plus the pandemic discount. So if you're interested, you can contact me. I'll put my email address here. I basically handle the Americas, and then my partner Ian handles the rest of the world. So like Europe, Asia Pacific. So I'll put his email in there as well.
One thing I Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. Jump in.
Okay. I'll just talk quickly about our QC as well. So having the ICMU licenses, obviously throughout the facility, it's very easy for our QC specialists to look at the obviously the exported HDR footage with the XML to check all the metadata version that the cut points are lining up correctly. So it's a great tool to have. And obviously then for all the versioning, you don't necessarily have to do that in a Hero Suite as well. You could have it anywhere that basically enables that, and you can spit out all your versions as well. So it's fantastic.
So,
and yeah, sometimes as well, you could use that the ICMU export to check both your HDR and your XML pass. But I would recommend obviously bringing in your exports again. So I'd bring in my rendered out image sequence or master, and pull in the XML for that, and then spit out an SDR for QC.
Yeah.
That speaks to something that Mark Spano was asking there. I hope I'm saying your name right there, Mark. Where he said that exporting a QuickTime seems to only be appropriate for SDR, but how do you make and serve HDR files for review? Is it basically that you have a different ICMU trim level, let's say 600 nit, and then as long as your iPad or whatever is playing it is expecting 600 nit and set that way, then you effectively have a baked preview?
Yeah, so that's one way. So the iPad Pro it is rated at 600 nits. So
Right.
You could essentially render out a 600 nit target from the ICMU essentially, and just encode it, and then look at it on an iPad Pro. Now there are also other companies, like Moxion is making a review and approval type application that allows you to load the Dolby Vision mezzanine as a ProRes file and a sidecar XML, and then it encodes it, lets you send email links to anyone who has an iPhone 8 Plus or later, or an iPad Pro, or a Dolby Vision, like a Dolby Vision TV, like an LG or a Apple TV Pro. So if you guys are interested in that, send me an email and I'll send you a link to that webinar last week that Adam was talking about that we did, that kind of goes through the different ways to encode your content. And with the pandemic, how you can start thinking about remote review and approval with your clients. So Adam, let's hear what you do just quickly. How do you have your clients in COVID land?
It's been something that we're definitely troubleshooting, and obviously there hasn't been too much production going on the last several months. Although we've got Marvel shooting on the lot here right now, and there's lots of productions that have started shooting again. But in our experience, we would either create a Rec 600 master and send that out using the Dolby workflow again, and send out, like, obviously with the HDR baked in for them to view, or in some cases even with DOPs we work with regularly. I know Marcus has calibrated some home televisions for that purpose as well. So it's as simple as getting that file sticking in the TV and watching it on there. We haven't done any of the things like Moxion, or the actual Dolby tool itself is, it needs a bit of setup. It's a fantastic tool, but at this stage we're not doing that. But it's definitely something we're looking at, because I think that's really handy. And then of course, obviously with the metadata, it'll adjust to what your TV can handle. So.
And then someone was asking if you do Netflix QC, or do it yourself or outsource the QC part.
We've got an internal QC person here who's fantastic. He's well regarded. I think he's the only DPP approved QC operator in Asia Pacific. So he's fantastic, and he does all our QCs in house. So so far we haven't had any Netflix rejections. And we're delivering to all sorts of people, and the problems are very trivial. So, you know, we're delivering to, we'll have delivered to Sony, Netflix, Amazon, DPP, which is, you know, basically the BBC. So yeah, we're finding that quality control we can definitely do in-house.
All right.
All right. Well, I think we're at the top of our time. We'll follow up with any remaining questions with folks following the webinar. I just want to share a last few slides before we wrap up. All right, so while I still have most of your attention, before we wrap up, I want to take a moment to mention that we will be hosting a 3-day virtual event in September called the Autodesk Vision Series. There are currently 2 Flame-related sessions planned for the event. The first, which will be led by will be on September 9th, and we're going to dig into the impossible things being done by Flame artists. And then on September 11th, Flame artist Bilali Mack from Alchemy X is going to lead a panel discussion on the role of artists and creating during times of unrest. So if you want to learn more, go to the URL on the screen here. At the moment, that page just has an overview of the event, but if you check back tomorrow after 2 p.m. Eastern, the full schedule and registration will be available as well. Thank you again for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed the webinar. I'm really excited by the number of questions that came in for everyone. We invite you to follow all of us on Facebook and Twitter, where we will be posting a recording of this webinar shortly. Again, I know these are challenging times and really appreciate that you were all able to tune in today. So from our team to yours, we hope you and your families are all safe and well. Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks, Adam, for joining us, as well as you, Tom, AB, Dolby guys. That was fun.
Thank you so much. Adam, it was great to sort of see your workflow. I really appreciated it. Thank you.
Thank you guys for inviting me. It's chuffed to be invited.
Right on. Great. Thank you, everyone.